Great. So welcome everyone to Looking Forward, What's Ahead for Giving Circles in 2023 with Hali Lee. We're thrilled to have all of you here today. This is actually our first kind of big event of the new year, so it's great to see so many of you. How today is going to work the next hour, we're going to have a conversation between Emily, our founder, and Hali. Then we're going to open it up to you for an audience Q&A. And then we're going to try and do some networking. So just connect some of our attendees at the very end so you can meet each other and just make some connections that way as well. So first of all, please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from and what giving circle you're a part of. And I'm going to actually pass it over to Emily now.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks, everyone. It's so good to see so many people here. What a great turnout. Holly, we have almost 100 people here for you. This is fantastic. Very nice to see all of you. So I just want to take a couple minutes to give a quick intro before we turn it over to the conversation with Holly, which is obviously the most important part of our time. But just briefly, I want to make sure those of you who are newer to Giving Circles, newer to Grapevine, have a little bit more of a sense of what we're doing here, what this Giving Circle model and movement is all about. So first, this is the 5th event of a new series of Grapevine speaker events. And the goal of these events are to hear from leading thinkers, practitioners, and industry experts in the Giving Circle and just broader philanthropic and community building space. The series is for all the Giving Circles on the Grapevine platform and beyond across topics and locations. So it's really an opportunity for those of you who are here to connect with a wide variety of individuals. And to that end, as Gabby said, please do say hi in the chat. Let us know which Giving Circle you're a part of, or maybe thinking of joining. Maybe you haven't joined one yet. And then this is a community-driven movement, so we always like to try and help connect the community. So as Gabby said, we will be doing some networking later, but you might also find some connections in the chat that often happen. So definitely look out for others in similar areas or Giving Circles that you might want to connect with afterward. So then just quickly, what is Grapevine? So Grapevine powers Giving Circles. We are the only platform dedicated to Giving Circles that provides them with an online home and a community for leaders and members. So we've built and provide the infrastructure tools, the training, events, and more to really help support and scale the Giving Circle movement, along with other great players in the space. And we're also now helping to start new Giving Circles in areas and around different causes where they don't yet exist. So if you've received an invitation to join a Giving Circle on Grapevine recently, welcome. That's part of that great initiative to help grow this movement, and excited to have you here with us. I think we'll be okay. Oh, I think we have one person on mute, Gabby, if you don't mind. Thank you. Okay, and so then lastly, I just want to say before turning over to Holly is that if you want more information about a new group you've been invited to join, that's great. We actually do a weekly office hours on Fridays at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, that you can join and learn more about a specific group that you're thinking about joining, or maybe even thinking about starting. So please do join those. And maybe, Gabby, if you don't mind, we could drop the link to that in the chat so everyone has that. And we can send that and follow up to this as well. Okay, so with that little bit of level setting, would love to turn over to Hali now. So Hali Lee has spent her career democratizing and diversifying the field and practice of philanthropy. She is a co-founder of the Donors of Color Network and also founded the Asian Women Giving Circle, which has moved over $1 million to support arts and activism in New York City. She also runs a consulting practice that aims to change the landscape of philanthropy called Radiant Strategies. Holly has been a foundational force in the Giving Circle movement, and so we thought who better to hear from on the state of where Giving Circles are headed than Holly. So thank you, Holly, for being here. Welcome.
It's so nice to be here with you all. And hi, Eliza, fellow Brooklynite, and I think Beth Cantor's on the phone too. I always like to say hi to the folks I know. And Emily, thank you and your team for inviting me to spend some time with y'all today.
Of course, thank you. Well, to kick us off, Holly, I know this event is looking forward, what's ahead for Giving Circles in 2023, but would love to start by just taking a moment to look back. Can you talk a little bit about when you first got involved in Giving Circles and what the landscape of it was like at that time?
Gosh, well, I could talk about this for a long time, as you know, Emily, and Eliza's been running her giving circle for as long as I've been running mine. So I think a bunch of you on this call probably know a lot about this space. But I started the Asian Women Giving Circle 17 years ago, and when I had this idea, I don't know why I thought of it this morning, but you asked to go back, and when I Googled Asian Women Giving Circle, the things that came up on the internet were porn sites. It was really bad. And I remember
Terrible.
it's terrible. And I was like, oh my God, this is a sign that we need to do this philanthropic effort, And then I also remember trying to join a philanthropic association in New York City and being turned down because giving.
Oh, Holly, you muted yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
That was a ghost. But anyway, so we tried to join a philanthropic, I don't know, like a network in New York City, and got turned down because we weren't considered philanthropy. So a lot's changed. You guys are around, philanthropy together is around. There's just been this huge growth and proliferation of giving circles, which is amazing. But really, if we go back, and I think about the origins of the Asian Women Giving Circle, it's a Korean idea called a get. And each one of us in this Zoom room has a culture of giving in our heritages, whether it is tithing in a church or tzedakah if you're from a Jewish faith motivated person, or zakat if you're a Muslim motivated person, or in parts of West Africa, they're called susus. In Mexico, they're called tandas. My Eritrean friends call them mahabers and iyadars. I would love it if in this chat you could put something, a word or a person, a tradition in your family that is a generosity tradition where you learned how to do this stuff. Maybe it's a grandpa or a grandma or a church or a place of worship. And in Korea, it's called a get. And so if we were in a get together, each of us would put in, I don't know, $100 a month. There's always food and wine or drink as part of a get, as lots of our giving circles have experienced. And then we would take turns taking the pot home. And I've heard of really big gets in Queens and other immigrant communities where the pot might be $500,000 and people could use it to start a business. So I was part of several like really frivolous but fun girlfriend gets with my buddies. And we'd meet at Ipado because it's yummy and cheap in the village, get ramen, put money in the pot and take it home. So taking that idea and adding a philanthropic twist was really the beginning of the Asian Women Giving Circle. I'd also been a board member of the New York Women's Foundation. After having been a grantee partner, I was the ED of a domestic violence services provider in the Korean American community in Queens. And I was a grantee partner, and then I was on the board for 6 years. And that's where I learned about the power of kick-ass women aligned around values, moving hundreds of thousands of dollars at a meal, and truly the power of kitchen tables, and that kitchen tables have been the locus of a lot of powerful organizing in our country and probably forever. And a lot of that organizing is powered by women. I love this chat. Keep it.
I know. It is so great.
I need to
Such a great prompt. Yeah, thank you for sharing, everyone. It's nice to see all these different terms coming in. The power of the kitchen table. I've seen Holly's kitchen table. It's very powerful. It's a great community connecting place for sure. So Holly, just turning our focus more to the future then, I'm curious if I were to ask you to give an update on the state of affairs for giving circles heading into this new year, what would you say?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert in it at all, but here's just some things that I've observed. And I think it's time to do another research project, what's that school in Michigan? Grand Rapids did a survey of 10 years of giving circles from 2007 to 2017. Oh, Abby, thank you for sharing. That's totally lovely. So in that 10-year period, giving circles around the country just like took off. The graph is like exponential, but now it's been, I don't know, that's been 5 years or more since that last study, which was really done in 2016, right? So I think it's time for another study. So I think it's really cool that giving circles are really taking off around the world. There's now 2 infrastructure organizations that support giving circles. And remember, like we were not even considered the stepchild of the stepchild of the stepchild. Like no one would even talk to me. I just wanted to get in on some of the philanthropy network conferences even, and got rejected because we weren't considered philanthropy. But of course, we've been doing this longer than philanthropy even existed. Like our people have been doing philanthropy before we even used that word philanthropy, right? So it's like kind of pissed me off, and like a lot of things, like a little bit of anger and a little bit of hope and a little bit of optimism and some cheerleading and some, grit and sticking with it. Like that's how you get things done. So I'm really excited about the proliferation of giving circles around the world and the birth of Grapevine, thanks to you, Emily, and also a Philanthropy Together. And full disclosure, I was on the co-creation team that helped build Philanthropy Together, and they have a ton of resources, and you guys know all about that. And I know you guys work together, Emily, around supporting the infrastructure around collective giving. I'm super excited about the connection, and this is just me personally, the connection between giving circles, collective giving, and democracy. There's the States Project I joined a political giving circle for the first time in my life after the 2016 presidential election. And since then, the States Project has moved, I don't know, close to, I think, $8 or $9 million to flip state legislatures around the country. And the circle that I joined has sent money to Michigan for 5 years, even though this is a group of New York City moms, many of whom, we sent our kids to preschool together. And after 5 years of not flipping the Michigan state legislature, this year they did it. And this giving circle, which is mostly New York City moms and a couple of good dads, were the biggest donors to those state races, state ledge, House and Senate in the state of Michigan races. And that's like how our democracy should work, right? Like engage citizens, learning more, knowing more, getting involved, asking questions, just pushing upstream, why, and then working to get stuff done at the state level. I'm just like super inspired by that. And then some of the stuff you guys are doing is really cool, Emily, like the intentional outreach to corporations, right? Like people where the people who work, the employees are already coming together around identity, sometimes ethnicity, sometimes there's a women's group or an Asian American group or a Latinx group at XYZ organization or corporation. And those are such prime, they're already grouped. So let's get them involved in pulling money and giving it away. And then I would advocate pushing it a little further, like get involved in volunteering and even getting the vote out and even working on the political side as individuals if their corporation can't. So those are sort of some of the trends that are really exciting me.
That's great. Thank you, Holly. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to see giving circles. Some people, I think, don't realize that giving circles are supporting a broader range of things than just nonprofits, right? Most giving circles are supporting philanthropically nonprofits, but there are those that are supporting individuals or projects or political organizations and candidates. So it really is a model for change, much more broadly applied, I think, than
100%. And that's a huge trend, I think, that mainstream big philanthropy is starting to pay attention to too. Like, and if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like if 10 of us on this call are in a giving circle, every single one of us 10 is, I'm going to bet money, is giving to a C3, is giving to some political issue, cause, or person or candidate, is giving money to family and friends in support of like rent, or I'm going to pay for this vacation, or someone needs a little help with, their car payment this month or whatever. Like we're supporting family and friends. And we're also maybe giving to places, tithing or giving money to places of worship. And we're doing a lot, maybe parts of mutual aid organizations, neighborhood refrigeration, neighborhood food organizations, collecting food organizations, whatever. And we're probably involved in just giving cash, like in GoFundMe's or people's, life events intervene, and we're supporting friends and family or friends of friends and family. Every single one of us 10 in that circle is doing all the things that we individuals, humans, do in America to help one another. And only a tiny fraction of that is actually C3 charitable. And I think that if we're going to think about philanthropy writ large, we've got to consider all those different ways that each of us is generous with our time, talent, treasure, testimony, and ties, right? The 5 T's. Some people go up to like 10 T's. I usually think about those 5. And, those are, and my favorite actually is the influencing one, like the ties. How can I open doors for this person who needs to do this good thing in my community? Who can I introduce them to that will help them put meat on their dream, the bones of their dream kind of thing. Like that's one of my favorite of the 5 T's. So
Mhm.
giving circles are such a great vehicle for animating all of those 5 T's and all of the things that we individuals do anyways, to
Mm.
help our neighbors, friends, family, towns, communities, block associations, everything. So I just think giving circles are a perfect vehicle for amplifying all of those ways in which individuals already are getting involved to help their neighbors.
I love that. We often hear that question, is there a way to volunteer and do more beyond providing funding through a giving circle? And absolutely, there's such a wonderful community-based vehicle to facilitate that. So I'm curious, Holly, what you think the biggest challenges might be for giving circles and maybe the collective giving movement more broadly right now and as we head into this coming year.
I have 2 thoughts about that, Emily. One is like super micro. Like, I've talked to lots of people who are starting giving circles. I'm sure you have, and Gabby and Eliza and other people on this call. And I think that one of the big barriers that comes up for people is like the paralyzing thing of, oh my God, it's too hard, it's too complicated. And I remember one woman was starting a circle in Boston, and it was going to be, she called me because she had heard about the Asian Women Giving Circle, and their group was like totally stuck on this thing, like, should we take money from white people? Because it was an Asian circle, the people in the steering committee were going to be Asian American. And I was like, of course you should, like, don't think about that too much. Like, don't waste so much time. And if you decide that, take the money, it's not like you're talking about, cigarette companies or whatever. Like, these are individuals who are friends of your friends who are in the circle. Yeah, yes, take the money. And if a year later you feel like, okay, we don't want to do that anymore, then you can switch, you can change. And like, just get started. People can get really hung up on this perfectionist, I've got to have everything figured out and every T, every I dotted and T crossed or whatever. And that's just like super paralyzing. So from the micro level, my advice almost always is get together with your friends, talk about these basic things, which we can talk about later, and then just start. And then midstream, 6 months later, you can adjust if it's not something right for you. It doesn't feel right after that. Macro level, because, a lot of the work I'm doing now is sort of at the more macro level, philanthropy wise. And one of my questions this week actually is around agnosticism. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm really curious, and I'd love to find some buddies to do a little research project. And some of the very big philanthropic organizations have been historically, and almost their virtue is being agnostic, values agnostic about everything. And my question is, if we push people off that fence somehow, and they can go left, they can go right, I'm not going to tell them which way to go. We all have there's a plethora of opinions and ideas, and that's what makes a democracy work. But if we push them off their agnostic fence, I wonder if it would push them to give more and give better and give wiser and more aligned with their values. Because by being super agnostic, you're picking a values neutral stance, which I think in this world is increasingly impossible. And if we look at the Koch brothers on the right and the Soros family on the left, they're giving a lot of money aligned with their values. And I wonder how they would compare to other donors who are just sitting on the fence. And I think sitting on the fence kind of, this is me, this is the thing I'm thinking about this week, you guys. So we can push me off this fence in 1 minute. But I wonder if sitting on the fence of that agnosticism fence is one way that contributes to that swirl of perfectionism. I don't know, there's so many choices. It's related to the first thing that I mentioned of just like getting so caught up in the details in a way that you can't even take a step out the door. And it's a learning mindset, right? Like we talk about this a lot in our spaces, and I think part of being an expert actually is often knowing where I am inexpert, and knowing, like always wanting to learn and always being humble and always being open to screwing up and having my mind blown, honestly, in a good way, and being surprised and learning new things. So those are 2 thoughts for there, Emily.
Thank you. Those are great thoughts. And definitely on the micro side, the paralyzation around getting started is something we see all the time. We say the same thing, just do it, just get started. And you'll iterate and learn along the way. And it's the best way to do it if you're looking to join a group or start a group, whatever the case may be. And it's also interesting, your point about the values piece on the macro level, because we actually see that on the micro level in a way too, with giving circles, often newer ones that are getting started wanting to have these values discussions, and leaders asking us, how do we have these discussions with our members? Because people are asking us about this. And so we're seeing that trend as well, I would say, within giving circles, where people are thinking about that and wanting to align with others in their group. And maybe in some cases saying, you know, the way the values are coming together in this group is great, but I actually have this other thing that I want to focus more on. So I'm going to start another group of my own that's really focused on, you know, these values or this perspective that I have. So
totally. And, you know, I'm writing a book, Emily and Gabby, and it's called
wonderful.
The Big We. And there's a chapter in the book, and and I have an agent, and I love her, and hopefully wish me luck, everyone. I'm really lucky, she'll sell the book early this year. And the idea is that collectively we are just so much stronger than the sum of our individual parts, right? And that's the premise behind all of this giving circle work. And there's tons of stories in this book, and it's been a total blast to write so far. I mean, talk to me in 6 months, I might really hate myself then, but so far it's been really fun. And there's a chapter in there about like, sorry, I missed the comment. Oh, maybe it was a squeaky mic. There's a chapter in the book about exactly this, like how to have a values how to lead a group conversation around finding common values for that group. And the work that I'm doing at Radiant is actually based in this as well. You know, we're building this curriculum for donors to move faster along their equity learning journeys. And an early step is to identify personal values. And if I'm working with a group, like what are the 3 or 4 or 5 really animating values for me as a human doing work in this sector, and also with my giving and my volunteer time. And if I'm working with a group, it's important to identify the group's common values for group work forward, and also to identify where my personal ones don't exactly match. And it's not a bad thing, it's just something to be aware of. Like if I'm prioritizing love and my group that I'm working with doesn't, that's okay. You know, I just have to kind of know that that's an area that I'm not going to win in a way if I'm trying to move my group towards a goal in the world.
Right. Yeah, I love that too. And yeah, it's thinking about maybe in some ways your giving circle being part of your broader philanthropic life and engagement, right? It doesn't have to fulfill everything. So being aware of what it does and doesn't, so you can also think about other ways of getting at everything that you're focused on.
Totally.
Holly, I'd love to take that direction of some of the other work that you're doing in the philanthropic space, because you have really done a lot of work on the broader diversifying philanthropy space. And I'm thinking of the Donors of Color Network that you helped to found. We had a number of questions come in from the community, and we can get to some of those in a minute, but it seemed like a lot of people are interested in this part of your work. And so I wonder if you can share a little bit more on why you think this diversification is so important, and where you think we're at with further diversifying the collective giving movement and philanthropy more broadly.
Well, it's
things, I guess.
Building the Donors of Color Network was a total blast. And I got to lead the research, one of the research pieces that became kind of one of the underpinnings of that network. And it's called the Portrait Report. Philanthropy always sounds like someone else. A portrait report of high net worth donors of color. And I can share the link. It's a free download on my on Radiant's website. I can send the link to the executive summary and the full report for anyone who's interested. And basically the sector hasn't caught up in a way with the reality of where we're at in America. And all of us come from cultures of giving, but philanthropy has mostly been a white story in this country. And not only has it been a white story, it's often been a white male story. And to make it even worse, it's sort of been a white dead male story. So, you know, the Portrait Report is just like one attempt to just bring us up to, you know, not even modern times, but just like get us into relevance, you know. And organizations, the sector, there just needs to be 1 million Donors of Color networks, and there needs to be 1 million Asian women giving circles, and there need to be 1 million CINs, community investment networks, which is a network of mostly Black circles, mostly in the US South. There need to be 1 million Latino giving circles, which is a network of Latinx giving circles up and down the great state of California. There need to be 1 million queer folk giving circles. There need to be, you know, in this country, there should just be so many giving circles or groups of people engaged in giving along every kind of combination of ethnicities and identities that we can imagine. Like that's what this, in my opinion, that's what would make this sector like so vibrant and so just humming. And I know we're going to talk about bees later, but just think about like how incredible that would be. And the Donors of Color Network is the first ever network that brings together wealthy folks of color in a philanthropic network. But as we know, folks of color have been philanthropic and generous always in this country, from the very beginnings of enslaved African people coming together in mutual aid efforts to further their, I can't even say freedom because it was so impossible in the 1600s to imagine that, but to further their lives and connections. And then with the flows of immigrants that have come to this country, and of course the many potlatch societies run and organized by Native and Indigenous folks in this country before any of the rest of us were here, and then add to the mix the flows of immigrants who have come to this country, all of us practicing giving and generosity informed by our cultural heritages and endowments. And Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about this, right? Like he was this French guy that came to this country in the 1800s with his friend, and he noticed this propensity of people in America to come together in mutual aid societies. So by the time he wrote that 2-volume treatise in the 1800s, there had been millennia of collective giving and generosity practices practiced on these lands by indigenous folks and enslaved African people and freed African American people. So the history is really, really rich. So it's funny that the Donors of Color Network and this recent research is kind of new. I guess it kind of is new because it's been written for the philanthropic sector and space. And I had the great privilege of finding, interviewing, and recording and now sharing the stories of upwards of 150 wealthy folks of color across the country. The themes and stories of 113 of those interviews are in the paper that I can share with you guys after the call. But so it's like one of those things that's important, but it's also like, duh, like it's overdue, it's over time. Yeah. These people have been doing this giving and these generosity practices for millennia, and now moving those practices onto this shore. And the challenge, I think, for the sector and including the giving circle sector is how best to welcome all of those practices, voices, and peoples and traditions, as all of us are trying to kind of figure out how those traditions and heritages become part of what is called philanthropic practice in America today.
Well, Holly, I love that ending thought, because one of the questions that we get often from existing giving circles is around that, like, how do they prioritize this in their work? So I think it's such a beautiful vision to have all of these other giving circles created, the Latinx and more CIN circles. And yes, absolutely. And if anyone here wants to create one of those or know someone who should, please encourage them, reach out to us, reach out to Philanthropy Together. We want to help you. But what about those giving circles that exist and are thinking about how do they prioritize more diversity, equity, inclusion within their existing group? What would you say to
That's a tough one. I was just in Iowa, and I'm from Kansas City. I grew up in Kansas City. My family immigrated from Korea when I was a baby and ended up in Kansas City. And it, very white, part of the world, and my neighborhood certainly. And my brother and I were the only Asian kids in our schools always, until Kim Wong came in 5th grade, and Kim and I are friends to this day. So I was in Des Moines, Iowa, speaking about the portrait report, and this question came up. And I pushed back, and I've had this conversation also with some very fancy, very wealthy women's networks who are really desperate to diversify their donor roles and their membership. And, I really ask, but why? This is a moment when everyone is doing a DEI training, and it's a checklist. Like, people have to do these things at work. They have to prove certain numbers, whatever the parameters are. And I just want to ask why, because if it's really a checklist thing, then don't do it. one of my mentors and dear friends in the philanthropic space is Donna Hall. She's the outgoing president of the Women Donors Network. And she for years, she this became a big effort of hers to diversify the WDN membership over 10 years. And they started, as many of us would, but just by asking people to just come, if someone had a friend or two friends or whatever, just come. And it was really damaging, like I myself was one of those people that got asked to come, and I had a couple of like not that great experiences. It happens, fairly regularly. Like I was mistaken for the help, the housekeeping, the server, always considered, maybe the speaker, but never a member. People asked to touch my hair. People commented on how good my English was, etc. Right? Oops, is that supposed to happen?
No, I don't think so. Somehow we're accidentally getting a screen share.
Oh, okay. Well, so anyway, so the WDN leadership, to their credit, just like stopped the project, and they had to rethink how they were going to continue on this effort to diversify their population. And it's true, because the goal is like different backgrounds, different thoughts, different ideas, like more ideas get into the pot, and the solution becomes better. Like generally that's true, but the way to get there has to be done very thoughtfully. Otherwise, it can harm people before the group, if the group isn't really ready to embark on a project like this. So I always really ask, like, why, and in some parts of the world, like it's harder now, like Des Moines has an increasing lots and lots of immigrants are coming to Des Moines from different parts of the world, including parts of East Africa and parts of Southeast Asia. But those folks are not included in the philanthropic conversation at all, so it just like, how do you start to integrate folks like that into a legacy, pretty white community foundation, say, that's just, it's not easy, and it's not something that can be done in like 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 10. I think that one of the things we talked about at that organization was like, what's the 5-7 year plan for hiring, for development staff, leadership staff, and board development, because when we were building the Donors of Color Network, I mean, I'll share an example from a boo-boo I made, like when we were building the Donors of Color Network and the portrait report, the three of us who were the co-founders are a South Asian queer woman, an African-American Black woman, and me, a Korean American immigrant woman. We did not have on our core team someone who is Latino, Latinx, or Hispanic identified. So doing the research project, about 30 interviews in, and I was the leader of this project, I realized we were super skinny on Latinx representation and voices. And and so I stopped the project. I just literally said, okay, we got to stop. We have to fix this, because before we get too far along. So we paused, and I called the Ford Foundation, the Gates Foundation. I called the muckety mucks that were funding this project. We were really lucky to get their funding, but it's not easy to call a big funder like Ford and say, hey, we're screwing up. I need to pause this midstream. But they were super nice about it. They were like, good for you. Better to pause now and figure out how to fix this. And we did. So we added some cities. I redoubled my outreach to people I know, and so did the other people in my networks. And by the time we finished, we had a greater than national representation sample of Latino, Latinx, and Hispanic identified people. So there's an example of, even in a research project, the founding DNA in a way. We were not, in our founder group, representative of all the groups that we wanted to be representative of. So without intentional effort and some mistakes, we could only then could we kind of recorrect and readjust. And so when we talk about starting Giving Circles, Emily, which I know Grapevine is really doing, and I'm going to say something that's probably not going to be very popular, but the founding DNA is actually incredibly important, I believe, and we found this in our research to build the Donors of Color Network. The people who you have in the room, in that living room, for the first 1, 2, 3 years of that Giving Circle or organization's founding, set the DNA of who's going to be in that room 20 years later. So if you start with mostly white women with wealth who are from a coastal city, focusing on whatever, 20 years later, that group, 80% will be very much like that founding DNA group. So if your goal is to start with a cross race or cross class or cross lived experience giving circle, it's you got to do it from the very, very beginning. That said, kind of like the family that you're born into, right? Like there are such things as amazing and beautiful intentional families and intentionally created communities. And I can improve my life by getting educated and reading great books and surrounding myself with smart friends and lovely friends who have big hearts. There's lots of things I can do to sort of change the DNA of what I got in life from my cultural and DNA endowment, but it's hard and it takes a lot of effort. So when you're starting something, an organization or a book club or an adult sports league, women's soccer team or whatever it is, or a men's hockey, whatever the group is, if one of your values is for it to be cross-lived experience, however you want to define that. And in Des Moines, I would say it's like maybe diversity in Des Moines looks different than diversity in Brooklyn, where Eliza and I live, so you just don't beat yourself up if your town just isn't going to be what you want it to be, but there's different ways that you can add different points of view and lived experiences to your group if that's a value of yours. Sorry,
Thank
super
you,
long-winded. But
no, that's great. It's so good to hear your personal experience too, but starting with that why, starting early and just being really intentional. And I like that ending point too. Like, don't beat yourself up, because where you live, diversity might look different depending upon where you live and where your group is and what you're trying to accomplish. I think those are great insights for everyone. I know we're just about at time. We want to make time for a few questions. So everyone get your questions ready. We can do just a hand up for the Q&A or drop it in the chat. I do want to just maybe end though, Holly, with one last question before we turn to the audience while they're getting their questions ready, and just ask you, what are you personally most excited about for Giving Circles and the collective giving movement and where it's headed?
I don't really have much to add other than what I said before. Like, I'm just super excited for more and more and more and more. I'm really excited for more and more people from diverse backgrounds and different lived experiences to get in on this weird thing called philanthropy in America and really change it up for the good of our communities and for the good of the sector that I've worked in for 30 years. I'm super psyched about that. I'm really excited about the possibilities of Giving Circles being involved in civic engagement and political sector work, like through the States Project. And I can share that link with anyone who's interested, because they're just perfect. It's just perfect. And those are the two trends I'm excited about. But I see Conrad has a hand, and let's move over to you guys.
Okay. Conrad, yeah, I would love to hear from you. I think you're still muted though, if you don't mind.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi. Nice to
Hello.
meet you. I'm down here in New Orleans, Louisiana. I was wondering if you guys have any operations out this way.
We do, yeah. And Gabby, maybe you can drop in the chat for you some of the Giving Circles that are in that area that you can check out.
Awesome. Yeah, this is my first introduction. It's my first meeting, so I'm interested in learning more and just here to understand what you guys are about.
Welcome,
Fantastic.
Conrad. Dig in.
Thank you.
Excited for you.
A great first meeting to join, Conrad. Well done. Lisa, yeah, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question too?
Yes, actually, I just really wanted to applaud Holly on her work. I'm also up in philanthropy and have a lot of lived experience to add to the field. And her points on diversity and the struggle that smaller communities have, and she even brought up, all the way back to slavery and the indigenous people. And that's with my human rights certification, that's something that I tried to bring to our local government. Because I have a blended family, and I've seen a lot of things go on in my community since I was a child. And I I also try to fight those things. I try to be a voice, for the people that I love and my future generations. So I just want to applaud you on that. And I was curious about the Women's Donor Network. I kind of picked quite a few names that were dropped on, so I just wanted to let you know I plan on reaching out to some of these because I'm struggling with trying to create the DNA in my board of directors. We have a very small organization. We're also grassroots, so I definitely kind of need some coaching. I've never been this person before, so but I have devoted my life to change and helping other people find a way out of what I've survived. So I just wanted to applaud her on her work.
Well, kudos to you, Lisa. That sounds amazing. Can you tell me what town you're in?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. Okay, so I don't know what your project is or what you're trying to, learn, or but I would suggest one good place to start is often a community foundation, because they might have some resources on coaching and fundraising and starting nonprofits and running a nonprofit, and also who are the other nonprofits in that area. So that just generally is good.
Yeah. Well, the Little Sisters Foundation is the organization who I am the chairwoman of. They've actually been founded for about 35 years in the country of Nepal. And we're rescuing children from being sold into sex slavery and things of that nature. So they've done for decades, they've done amazing work. And elected me the chairwoman a few years ago. So
Congrats, Lisa.
that being said, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Lisa, there are some giving circles in the Portland area. So Gabby can follow up with some thoughts there, but also check out the chat. Brianna Thomas, excuse me. Thank you for sharing. Brianna is in the Portland Women in Business for Good Giving Circle. So good connect for you there. Thank you. Lisa.
So great. I think Wanda and Sheena have their hands up.
Hi, this is my first meeting. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I have two questions. The first is, when I think about, my circle, I have a wide range of individuals that might be interested in participating or joining, but many of them do not have, resources where I would say, well, it's $100 a month. They don't have that resources yet. They may contribute in other ways that's just as meaningful as the money. And so I'm wondering if you've ever had that kind of experience, and with including, being more inclusive in terms of range of amounts that people can contribute every month, as well as contributions that may not be money per se. And my other question is if you could talk a little bit about your experience with individual grants for those who are on hard times, whether it be because of healthcare expenditures or, COVID or sudden changes in their situation.
You mean giving directly to individuals?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So regarding the first, there's tons of stuff out there, Wanda, and one of us can follow up with you after for more details, but check out the Giving Projects. It's an intentionally cross-class, cross-race giving circle project. And they have very, difficult, forthright, honest, but kind of transformative conversations with each other in the circle about income and wealth. And each person comes up with a number that is meaningful for them. And it will be very different for the people who are in that circle. But it's a very big commitment, but it's a transformative experience for many of the people who go through it. And there's lots of giving circles who do like $1 a day, or do your best to hit this number, or you're a graphic designer, we're going to count your, donations of your design skills for all of our events as your donation. There's tons of ways to cut the money. It just has to be something that your group talks about so that everyone is comfortable around the definitions of the contributions that you all decide to make. There's no right way, it just has to be comfortable for you. My giving circle is $2,500 a woman get, and you do your best. So one year, Sadi lost her job, so she didn't have to do her get that year. One year, BJ had twins, so I knew we would not see her for maybe 5 years, but I could call her for legal advice. So she's a lawyer, so there's different ways that you can kind of cut it so that it's just like it feels okay for everyone in your circle. In terms of individual dollars, that's hard in the C3 system that we have. America has this tax thing called 501c3. The history of it is kind of screwed up, honestly. It was meant to like cut orgs off at the knees in terms of the advocacy and political sector work they could do. The history's not great, but it's what we've got and it's what we can deal with. So the workarounds for giving to individuals, which my circle does, but it's a little tricky because we fund individual artists in many cases who are using the tools of arts and culture to bring about social change. So we connect individual artists with fiscal sponsors who can receive the grant for them and then give the money to the individual Asian American woman artist in New York City. There's also, there's lots of ways to just give money to individuals. Like right after George Floyd was murdered, there was a proliferation of bail funds, and that was just like individual people giving cash dollars by Venmo and to different bail funds to help people pay bail. And there's lots of GoFundMe's and stuff like that. So there's different ways. You don't get the tax deduction for giving to the GoFundMe's or the bail funds, but it's a good way to help your neighbor.
Great, thank you.
Sheena had her hand up.
It would probably help if I unmuted myself. So
It would. Hi, Sheena.
hello, how are you? I'm excited to be here. I'm here in Austin, Texas. And without going too much into personal business, I had asked earlier about what we could do about individuals, or if you were in this group and you find yourself in a place of needing help. So one thing that I experienced over the summer, and I know that I am not the only female that has had to go through this, where you've been either like in a relationship with someone or something happens that just devastates your entire existence and you have to start over. Or, things happen, and knowing, living in Austin, 1-bedroom apartment's $2,000 a month, and it's not anything fancy. So it's getting tough out here. I wanted to create a giving circle and find some kind of a solution for people that just really just fall on hard times like that, because it does happen, but often if you are single like myself, or you don't have kids and stuff, then it's almost like, well, you don't need help. And it's like, but I do. I'm one person. So I don't know if you guys know of something like that or can assist me in starting some type of a giving circle, because that's definitely in need. A lot of people are escaping domestic abuse, and unless you're being like, you've got a black eye and kids, it's like, oh, well, there's nothing for you. And you could just be someone trying to make your way in life.
Sorry that's happening to you or your friend. I don't have any personal experience or knowledge of someone starting a giving circle aimed in that direction. Of course, it's important to check out the domestic violence and intimate partner violence service organizations in your area.
Yeah.
And Austin has a whole bunch. And there's also GoFundMe's where individuals can set up pages, right? And GoFundMe's not the only one. Gosh, Emily, do you have any other ideas, or Gabby?
Or even for like, just apartment communities where a lot of people, there used to be things going on for that, to help with rent assistance. And there's so many, it's hard to find and it's not very easy. Unfortunately, in Austin, there are a lot of people during COVID that abused it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's all like, and that kind of like ruins it for everyone. And I just want to be able to start something even in my own apartment complex where I live, for folks that genuinely, sometimes you just fall on hard times, and we all deserve an opportunity to be able to reset our lives and, do what we need to do. It's important.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that, Holly. I think, sorry about that. I think there are a number of resources out there, but I think that it's one of those areas where there's a lot of need, and so it might be one of those areas where there's an opportunity to help create something new, or to reach out to some of the existing organizations and see about trying to build upon what they've done in collaboration and support some new work.
And nonprofits, maybe there's
Yeah.
some nonprofits out there that are providing services for people coming to town or falling on hard times too, Sheena.
Yeah.
So it might not
Okay.
just, it might not be a giving circle solution. So Laura Bernal has her hand raised in the chat, and Amy had her hand raised. I wonder if Amy has something to say to Sheena, or if this is a separate thing. No, okay.
Hi, sorry, kind of got full hands, but hand raised.
So Laura and then Amy, maybe?
Okay though? Pardon?
Should we do Laura and then Amy?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question, because I know we have not wanted to neglect like all the things that you guys are talking about today, but I think somebody said it depends to the area that you're in. And like how you were brought up, because I know like me personally, I feel horrible hearing about like all these things that they're having to deal with, but the way we grew up, it kind of was like we just never were taught that any of these segregations were ever supposed to be an issue. And so we kind of, I think in the giving circle, for us, like we're a very diverse city as it is. And I think that luckily we're very inclusive. And I think the mission statement itself has allowed us to have a very diverse group, just naturally, but we're still in our infancy. And so we haven't really started it yet, but I'm wondering your thoughts on, because we had thought about doing member spotlights, you know, as a way, I mean, to generate excitement, but also as a way of kind of showcasing the differences, and what it might bring as far as the giving circle or the community in general, but kind of celebrating like, hey, look at this person, look at that person, where they're from, what their upbringing is, and, you know, maybe just a small way of kind of celebrating all the different kind of people that we have in it. Because
That's a
they
great
all
idea.
generally good and give and, you know, work together, if that makes sense.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and share it. I'd love to see it. Yeah, cool. Amy?
Yeah, and I'd say, Laura, we've seen a lot of giving circles do that, and it's people love it too. It's a really great way to personalize it and help. So
We'll hopefully welcome other, you know, diversities and differences, and, you know, just have a bigger, happier group.
Is it my turn?
yeah, over to you, Amy.
Okay. You mentioned earlier, Holly, importance of following your values when you're looking at how you want to invest your time and energy and money. Oftentimes I feel that crippling feeling of not necessarily not wanting to pick a side, but being skeptical of what's on the side of what I am thinking of investing my donor dollars into. Do you have any recommendations on how to research what it is that you're looking to invest in, and how do you get past some of those walls that kind of say one thing, but really there's something behind it that maybe you don't want to support? I'm curious if that's been something that you've dealt with, and any recommendations on how we can do our good research to find out exactly what's behind the wall.
Well, I would want to talk with you a little more to find out what's behind what you just said, because it's like a really big question. So the first part I think is like, well, how do I find the 5 values that are really animating me, you know? And one of the things that we do, you know, with my team and with the folks I work with is like, look at where you spend your time, look at your friends, look at the things that you already do, because the answer lies in the things that you do, not in the things that you think you want to do, right? Like look at actually what you have done, and what was your major, what were the things you volunteered in, what have been the through line since you were maybe in high school, of the things that have moved you, what keeps you up at night, what are the things that inspire you, like the answers already are actually there, most of them, and then write them down and put them up. And then these are the things that, and then it comes really handy when you're faced with a hard decision, because if you write down my most important values are authentic relationships, building community, integrity, whatever they are, right? And if they're in front of you, then it helps you when you are faced with a hard decision. In terms of like feeling good about where you have set your money or spent your time or moved your influence to help someone. For people who are new to philanthropy, sometimes what I suggest is look at an organization in your town that you admire. So for me in New York City, it's the New York Women's Foundation, right? They give away, I don't know, X number of million a year to all the women and girls projects in New York City. I can be pretty sure that they've done a level of due diligence that I haven't, So for me as an individual donor giving my $500 or whatever it's going to be that year for women and girls in New York City, if I can pick one of the groups that the Women's Foundation has funded or shortlisted even, I can feel pretty good about that because they're going to have done way more looking at the finances and the leadership than I can, And so that's one way for me. And I advise my friends and colleagues and people I work with to kind of do the same thing. Pick a person or an organization who you admire, and they've done due diligence that you probably haven't. That's a good way to start. And then of course, long term, wherever you live, the best thing is for you to start meeting the people that are running these organizations, and people change jobs like we all do. So once you find a few different leaders in your town that you really admire, whose work you admire, you can almost follow them and who they're working with and funding and supporting and moving dollars towards as a way to feel good that your choices have been defensible and reasonable and impactful.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are great recommendations. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Amy. So we're just about at time. Allison, I see you have your hand up, so maybe we could end with one quick question from you, and then we're going to have to wrap up here.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm working for a parent company in Napa, and they have their own team of like making sure that our social media images, everything like that is inclusive. But within the company, there are team leaders such as myself looking to build a team. And I was wondering if you could suggest any resources personally that I can kind of check out just to make sure that I'm doing my part on my end to be inclusive of all my team members.
And you're talking about your company that you're working for.
I work for a company, and then, but I am encouraged to build my own team, like locally. So I'm in the New York City area, so we are very diverse, and I do have a national team. So I'm from Denver, but I've lived in Denver and I've lived in New York, so that's not exactly a broad, enough kind of world to properly represent or try and represent people. So I am blessed with a lot of diversity on my team and really strong women, especially. So I would just, if there's any resources that you could suggest, anything that could help kind of broaden my perspective for that.
Yeah, Holly, I don't know if you have any suggestions.
No, I don't really know like a recruiting HR headhunting. I don't really know one that focuses on this. So I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I just like any, or like even materials that you've found that are like, because I know there's a lot of stuff out there now.
Yeah,
I could pick up a book and, maybe thumb through some of the pages, but if it's not, or like specific authors, maybe somebody that is a favorite of yours that you really love on the subject.
Hi. Yeah, Allison, I don't know any ones in particular to recommend on like DEI recruiting, but there's a whole field I think that's really been growing around this space. And so I would recommend just, searching that, maybe looking on LinkedIn too. We see a lot of people joining actually giving circles who are working in this space. And so I see a lot of people in this sector, I think, who could be good resources. I'm sorry, I don't have any specific recommendations for you.
That's a great place to start.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Holly, for your time today. So good to hear your experiences and your advice, and really appreciate you taking the time to share. And thank you everyone for being here. It's such a great group. Really appreciate you taking the time to hear from Holly and learn more about Giving Circles and how you can grow and keep supporting yours. So thanks for coming. I hope we get to see you again soon. I'm sorry we didn't get to the networking part of this, but I saw a lot of good network connections happening in the chat. So 2 quick things for you going forward. We have a couple of other opportunities for you to connect with each other. One is if you're interested in signing up for a one-on-one coffee chat with someone else in this movement, whether they're in your local community or just more broadly across the country, but someone else in this Giving Circle movement, let us know. We'll drop a link in the chat now and you can sign up and we'll match you with someone else. We found people really enjoy that kind of one-to-one connecting with others in the movement. And then if you're looking for broader connection opportunity, we have a member mixer on January 27th. And we'll also drop the link to that in the chat. You can sign up for that. Please join. And that will be a full hour just dedicated to connecting and networking with other people in the Giving Circle movement. So those are really fun. We do those once a month. So you can sign up for that there. And we hope to see you at one of those or another speaker event, which has yet to be announced, but will be soon next month. So thanks all. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks again, Holly, and see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.